Welcome. Welcome to our series on Can You Hear Me Now? Transformative Nuggets for Practical Leadership in Ministry. I'm the Reverend Dr. J. Anthony Lloyd, pastor of the Greater Framingham Community Church, and celebrating 30 years of ministry as senior pastor there. I also serve as adjunct faculty member for Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary and their Boston campus, and over 30 years in teaching there, usually in the area of leadership. I come to you today hopefully sharing some practical nuggets I've discovered along the way to hopefully assist you as you do ministry. In this volume at this time, we want to talk a little bit about assessment and strategic planning, especially as we come out of this COVID experience and we're trying our best to make maneuvering throughout it all to figure out how do we go forward? What does it look like? What is the street? Today, I want to talk just specifically about some practical ways of assessment and strategic planning. In another session, we'll talk more specifically about the context of COVID, what it has done in ministry, and what it looks like coming out of it. But every leader struggles with the question, what should our church do? What should we be about? What is our biblical purpose and mandate for the church? Which in essence involves some kind, I hope, strategic planning. What I find over the years is that too many of my colleagues in ministry do not spend any time in this area. They shoot from the hip and they expect everyone in the pew to jump from the hip and go with them. And let me share with you, that kind of last minute planning or no planning at all shows up in the quality of ministry. It really does. You want to know why some folk don't hang with you long in ministry? This is one of the reasons why they don't. Because the rest of their world, they don't operate at the last minute. They do planning, they do strategic planning, they do putting time and thought ahead of time. They do wrestling out what direction we need to go. And then they come up at the church and the church is like, oh, well, next Saturday we're going to do so-and-so. This is a teaching mode and we need to invest in it. And there are ways in which we do it, in some ways that are profitable, in other ways it just does not do anything for us. So when I think about this, part of it is that what am I called to? When I talk about the future of the church, what are we called to? In other words, get specific about the church's future, about the ministry's future. How do we do it? One is, I think you need to concentrate on what I call limited range planning. Limited range planning. Long range planning is appropriate when we have a stable environment. But anybody knows today this is not a stable environment. It's not stable because of economics, because transitions with people in their lives. It is not stable because of coming out of COVID. This is inflation. We can go down the list. So this is not a stable environment. And because it's not, we need to be careful that we're not spending all our time talking about what's going to happen 5 or 10 years down the road, but do limited strategic planning. You figure out what that means, what period of time that is, and do strategic planning toward that basis. Remember, strategic planning is not something that is set in stone. It's set as a guidepost, as a guideline. It reflects your mission. It says what we will and what we will not do. It tells us the direction that we're going. It gives us even maybe the pace of which we're going at it. Second part about this in strategic planning and assessment is to understand or assess your congregation's character. Character. What do you mean by that? Well, you know what? I doubt very much people in your church can tell you what your mission statement is. I wish they could. It's not something they read every day or memorize every day. But you ask them, tell me what you like about your church. and they'll readily give you down the list and go down the list of what it is. That what they say and speak about your church, about your ministry, when they're talking to somebody in the grocery line, you get a chance to overhear a conversation between parishioners. They're talking about ministry. My word to you is listen to it. It speaks to the character of the ministry, what their perceptions are, what they understand about ministry. And that gives you a far more accurate picture about what really is going on or what the character is. And it is, yes, on some points, what objectives you put down on the paper that goes after what goals you've said you're going after. But what do people implicitly feel about your ministry? Your leadership, the ministry of the church, they speak to an issue of character of the congregation. And you need to get a handle on that if we're going to do. Certainly deal with the demographics. Demographics, meaning that who are you planning to reach? Lord knows, if you are in an environment where there are, there are no college students in that environment, why are you spending all your time trying to have a college ministry and there are no college students there? The best thing you got is a university where on the weekend all the college students go home to their own towns. But you need to understand the demographics of what's going on. Part of the demographics is your ability to plan. So if you have X number of baby dedications, right now I feel like that's all I'm doing is baby dedications. I think I've had 6, 7 already in the last 4 months. Well, that tells me that in 2 or 3 years from now, my early childhood ministry has got to be functioning at top level because I've got these children that will come of age and need to be in there. So that's strategically planning, looking ahead, understanding where you are, and then also going after it. Another danger is what I call probably ministry overload or opportunity overload. You know how it is, your church, everybody's got 2 cents to say about, well, there's a need in the community for this, there's a need for that, there's a need for that. You'll get overload because you're trying to say, okay, we can be doing that, we can be doing that. No, not every need is one that you're called to meet. That's an overload. And people get worn out. People don't have a vision. We'll talk about it one of these times about vision. But they can't handle that. They don't know what it is. And so we've got to be careful about opportunity overload. Not everything that needs to be done doesn't mean that church is supposed to be doing it. Stay in your lane of operating according to what your mission is and your calling is. Watch and be careful about the ministry opportunity overloads that happen. You certainly need to check out what other people are doing. As I've said earlier, I don't want to duplicate what someone else is doing. They're meeting the need, great. So we don't want to do overload, and we don't want to take it and duplicate what's going on. Figure out what they're doing, not for the purpose that I want to do what they're doing, not at all. If I understand the character of my congregation at a particular season in time that I'm in, there's certain things that we're doing now that we weren't doing 10 years ago. And then 5 years from now, we probably won't be doing those things because that is a different season, different time, and the character of those who are part of this church, how they see ministry and how they do ministry. It is different. Get a handle on what that means. Who are those people on your pew? Who are the ones who are in leadership? Who are the ones and what kind of time they're making in doing volunteer and doing ministry? What decisions are they making in making those decisions about ministry? What are the resources that you have in people, in time, yes, in money, but what are those? And then making them a part of it. The other thing I'll say to you, and that is this: take your purpose serious. Be serious about it. What is your purpose? It may be found in this state. We are a light in this community. Well, what does that mean? Capture hold to what it is and stay committed to your purpose. Otherwise, you find yourself spending a lot of time, energy over here, and then switching over here, And at the end of the day, you wonder what in the world you are accomplishing, if you're accomplishing anything. And 9 out of 10, you're probably not making a dent at all. Not a dent at all. So stay close to what the purpose is of what you see yourself is. Now, all of us, we're a church. There's some things inherent in what it means to be a church. But I'm talking about going one step further at a different level. The character of your ministry, the purpose of why you are on the corner that you are on. And then we start talking nitty-gritty. We get away from high-sounding words and descriptions and decide, okay, wait a minute, this is what we're about. I remember saying to my congregation as we moved from one community to the next, it really is probably about 8 blocks away. We're buying a building, said we're going there. I said, now, let's understand something. There's some things that come with the territory because of where we're located. There are other things that we will elect to do because we as a congregation decide we're going to do. And there are other things we decide we're not going to do. And to listen to the congregation articulate what those categories were so informative, so crucial for ministry. Remember that overload? All of it around me. And we've said, oh no, that goes into the category where we said, we will do that. So I've got all these feeding programs around me. I didn't need to do a feeding program. No way. There are all these little counseling programs, addiction programs. We decided we would not do it. And we owned up to that and kept close to the purpose. We wouldn't do it. At the same time, we understood the character of the congregation, that our children and our young people were extremely important. I learned that when I came to pastor the church. If anything, I learned whatever I did for my children and youth in that church and in the community, I could never do wrong. That's a part of the character of the congregation that you're serving, you're ministering to. Figure out what their character. That's about what they say is valuable to them. What they say when they brag about for the church. What they say when they say, this is my church. This is why I belong to the church. Those things go into this idea of character and importance. So when you talk about strategic planning, there are lots of books out, everybody talking about strategic planning, all that kind of stuff. Let me suggest that make it simple, okay? Number one, assessment. You got to do assessment. Start with an internal and external assessment. Assessment is that we discover where we are in this time and space in ministry. What's the assessment? What are the needs? Whatever way you want to go about it, get as many voices at the table. They give their input to what the assessment is. The assessment is a part of what are the opportunities here. Remember now, I'm not going to go after all the opportunities, but what are the opportunities? What are in community, in the church? What do they look like? Then a part of that assessment is understanding what my priorities are. Remember, I'm prioritizing where I'm putting time in, what this ministry is about, and what we're going to be saying and what we're going to be doing. Now, what that is that you certainly ought to look at what your strengths are. Strengths are what you do well. What is your church good at? Also, look at the weaknesses. Where's our weakness at? Where are we not meeting it? It doesn't mean that I've got to go after all those weaknesses right away and let's tackle them. No, but we need to get them down, and we have agreed upon that that is a weakness, and we agreed upon that this is a strength, and knowing what they are. Once we've done that, all that goes into what is this assessment phase. There's no time limit on it. It's more of an issue of who's at the table, who's contributing to it, whose voice is being heard, and that there is this collective agreement that this is an accurate assessment. Remember when I came to this ministry, probably a year into it, I said, okay, we're going to come together, brought someone outside of the church to lead the congregation in a process of understanding, and we developed, started with our mission statement, brought clarity to the mission statement, brought clarity to the goals, what we were about, what objectives, and put that all together and agreed upon. This is who we are because we've understood the context of where we were in ministry. And that became that allowed me as the pastor even to speak into it. So we are the Greater Framingham Community Church. And that means the vision of that ministry far crossed any territorial lines of city, town, or whatever. That's what we're talking about. The second one after assessment is vision. Vision. The second question, what do we want to be? Who do we want to be? People speaking into the vision. What do I want to be known in community about? When they think of them and hear your church's name, what do they think away right away? You have responsibility of creating that. Not allowing other people to create that about you. And it's a vision. What are people's aspirations? I remember when I first came to this particular church, and early on, and the person said, Reverend Lloyd, we want one thing was we want to know other churches. We are outside Metro West, and we don't know other churches. Nobody knows us. Can you help us that we have a connection to other churches? I understood that. That was a cry of the heart. And right away I said, okay, we can work on that. We can do that. That's important. The other point for them was to say, we are misunderstood. People who know us or know anything about us, they really don't know about us, who we are. Can we clarify that? Well, the clarification of that for a larger community is, first of all, making sure everybody in community are on the same page. We're clear about what we are. I can remember starting with the mantra that was, we are an extended Christian family. That was used to always say that about a church. That's long before I ever came to the church. I had to investigate to figure out, well, why did that line or that tagline become a part of the church? What I found out is that when the church got started some 50 years ago, they were started by people who were transplants to Metro West. They came from other parts of the country, other countries in the world, and they came there being brought by industry, businesses, or graduated from school. They settled there, and what they did was that they did not have those family roots that they started with from where they started from. And so we were an extended Christian family. Family, extended, open the arms, and while you are spending time, because your education, your school, or your business, your job brings you to this area, you are part of family. So understand that being a value that is a part of the characterization of the congregation or the ministry. Understand that, then you can start casting this here vision of what we want to be about. And let me share with you, most cases when people are working on strategic planning, the first thing you want to do is we want to go after what our weaknesses are and work on those. My attitude is start with what your strengths are. Start with what you're good at. Build on what you're good at. And any kind of endeavor, people want to see movement, progress. They want to say we're making a difference. Start with what you're good at and hone it in. And yes, focus in on it. And allow that to be the catalyst that you start addressing where your weaknesses are. Starting off, going after weaknesses only sets you up for one sense of doldrum after another doldrum, feeling like we're not making headway. Start with where your strengths are and go from there. Build on that. Remember, that's all done in context. There are seasons for some things, and some things, one of the hardest things for somebody in a ministry is to let go some stuff. I'm going to tell you right now, we have always done this. But the changing demographics, the community and what's going on, the changing demographics in your ministry doesn't support that anymore. And your ability in ministry to say, we are stopping and we're moving on to something else. This ministry is taking a different shape. That speaks volumes about your leadership. It speaks volumes about the maturity of your congregation. I'll share with you. I really don't have a problem with things crashing and burning. This ministry is no longer, in my evaluation, our evaluation, being effective. We're going to stop doing it. Now, some people will be on the pew like, oh my God, this is the end of the church because we no longer do so-and-so. No, not at all. Because what I recognize is that there's a resurrection principle operative here in the ministry. That God does bring life out of ashes. So it's okay. If something crashes, burns, we no longer do it. God can resurrect something that may be looking differently than what it was. Notice it's God doing it. It's not me doing it. It's not you doing it. It's God is. And I believe in a big enough God, that we can be faithful to our purpose. And it doesn't mean we have to do things always the same way. If you know anything out of this, coming out of this COVID, is that you know full well ministry will not be done the way it always has been done. It doesn't mean that I wholeheartedly jump in and go after whatever the latest trend is. Not at all. It's not a wholesale buying into whatever's coming down the pike. Not at all. But it is to say I'm being prudent, I'm being prayerful, I'm being purposeful, I'm living in our mission, and I recognize that God, in the wonder of being a creative God, that I can be creative in accomplishing that mission and holding to my purpose. That's where you want to bring a congregation to. That's where you want to be in this process of strategic planning. So do that. Now, once you've decided what those goals are, you've done the assessment, you've done vision, then we need to talk about setting objectives. Objectives are your steps and plans to reach that goal, what your vision is, what you're going after. What are your objectives? That's when you get into nitty-gritty, step by step. What is the step we're going to do? What is the first step? What is the second step? Who's going to do the step? What is the timetable for doing that step? And what is the connection between steps? That's objectives. And objectives need to be measurable. Hear me now? Measurable. Too much of what we do in church, we do not articulate it and make it measurable. So at the end of whatever we're doing, nobody has any idea whether or not we did anything or whether we accomplished anything. So build that in, that they are measurable. It takes some time. It may need to bring somebody outside your church to help you to streamline it. And it's more than just wordsmithing. We're talking about measurability in what you're doing. And that's when you are in objectives. Connectedness between one to the other. Lastly, I would say, is taking responsibility. Great, I got it on paper. Great, everybody agreed this is what we want to do. This is where we want to go. But now we get into nitty-gritty of who's going to do the work. Assign responsibilities. We want folk to have ownership for the ministry. It is not about me articulating, saying, this is where we ought to go. Yes, as pastor, God speaks into me. God gives me a vision. But I also honor and respect the fact that God honors and God speaks to people on the pew, people in leadership. And if anything, I need to have, as we've said before, my eyes open, my ears open, so I can hear what thus says the Lord. So, the assignment of responsibility, who's going to actually do it? And built into that is always this challenge of evaluation. We need to evaluate what we're doing. Do it while it's fresh. Some of it is, it may be written, but other times it's just doing a dialogue and discussion. Let's talk about women's retreat this weekend. What happened? What didn't? What went well? What was the process? What we accomplished? Where we think the impact is? Evaluate it. so that the next time we're going down the road, we have something to start with because we have done an evaluation of what we did. It's so crucial in what we do. And I dare say, outside of the fact that in a church and in a ministry, we do not write up ministry descriptions. The second thing what we don't do is we don't do evaluation. As long as everybody walked away and felt good about it, I guess it's okay. No. Do the evaluation. It's crucial. There are hosts of definitions for what success looks like. Let me show you what my definition of success looks like in ministry. The hustle and bustle of ministry with all kinds of demands. I'm called to be present in any given moment, from with someone who's rejoicing because a new baby or got married or something, to another moment when we're talking about death or dying or what have you. The range is unbelievable. And I want to be present in ministry with them. And so therefore, I really need to work on what my definition of success looks like. And here's my definition of success. It is that at the end of the day, when I put my head on the pillow, that I'm still in love with Jesus. That's my definition of success. Meaning that everything I've gone through today, or whatever I've sought to accomplish in ministry, that I'm not allowed it, as the songwriter says, nothing between my soul and my Savior in this world so delusive and free. I'm not allowed anything to get between me and who the Lord is in my life. That is where I do it. So that the next morning I wake up and start again in doing ministry and going forward. And in so doing, I am refreshed in knowing that what has been poured out, God has filled me again to do it. Remember, about self-care is about you in leadership and your relationship to God and what you're doing. So therefore, certainly I can put little tenets saying how many people joined the church, how many baptized, and we can go all down the list, all the different kind of measurement angles that we use. But none of them measure up to my success in ministry, which is about me being in right relationship with the Lord. If that being intact, there's no telling what God will and can do through you in ministry. I'm reminded of Isaiah when he became unemployed. And Isaiah says, in the year that King Uzziah died, he worked for the king. The king died. He's unemployed. And in the midst of that crisis, he said, what? In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and lifted up, and his train filled the temple. Can you see God in those crucible moments of ministry? Can you see him? We know full well he sees you, but can you see him? In doing so, what was Isaiah's response? Right away he said, I recognize I'm in a holy moment. I'm in a God-ordained moment. And right away, being in the presence of the awe of God, he said, I'm a man of unclean lips, and I dwell among a people of unclean lips. In other words, I am unworthy. I'm unworthy for this call of my life, this ministry that you've called me to lead. And God's response to that stature was to take coals from the altar and touch his lips and says, I seal you for ministry. I seal you for what you're doing. And from there, he could go on to do ministry. I know of no better place to be than having God's seal on my life, seal on the leadership seal on the ministry. So it means that I must stand in his presence, be amazed by his awe, have him put coals and touch my lips, for I recognize that I'm worthy and don't even come up to where I ought to be. But God fills me, for his train filled the temple. May God fill you in your ministry, fill you to overflowing, that you might bring glory and excellence in ministry.